the corner of Wimpole Street, Oxford Street and Cavendish Square. Lighting up time is at 6 tonight, nice and bright. The glitter and glare, odds over the square. Just got it tidy in Wimpole Street, Oxford Street and Cavendish Square. Then comes a couple of horses through. I ask you, who is that over there? Get off when you swear. Everyone wants to communicate. Nobody wants to be clean. Doing my bit to illuminate the victorious scene.
Just a minute, Nick. Jill!
Hello, Professor.
I wasn't expecting you till tea time. But what a pleasure. Come on in.
Thank you. I hope it's not inconvenient. I had an appointment on Harley Street, so I thought I'd just come on over.
I'm glad you did. Actually, I was expecting Nick Devon, one of my graduate students, but this is very fortuitous. You should meet each other. Nick is doing his doctorate on the dramas of Robert Browning, and with your interest in Elizabeth Barrett Browning, we shall have a conversational marriage of true minds.
I see that nothing's changed here since my last visit.
Well, you know how it is with professors. Life never changes. Just grows more cluttered.
Are you doing your usual lectures on the Brownings?
Oh, yes, and very well attended, too. There seems to be a great upsurge of interest, especially in Robert. But I miss that lovely face that used to look up at me from the third row. But sit down. I'll make some tea in a minute.
You know, I've never known whether it was coincidence or a clever design you're living here on Wimpole Street. I mean, did you move here because you were lecturing on the Brownings?
Or did I take up the Brownings because I lived just 4 doors away from Elizabeth's home? Well, some of both, I suppose. How's that for an enigmatic answer?
Robert would be proud of you.
Yes, and are you doing some Browning in your poetry programs?
Yes, usually tying it in with his interest in Shelley.
Ah, did you once see Shelley plain? And did he stop and speak to you? And did you speak to him again? How strange it seems, and new. But you were living before that, and also you are living after. And the memory I started at, my starting moves your laughter. I crossed a moor with a name of its own, and a certain use in the world, no doubt. Yet a hand's breadth of it shines alone mid the blank miles round about. For there I picked up on the heather, and there I put inside my breast a molted feather, an eagle feather. Well, I forget the rest.
Browning called Shelley the sun treader, didn't he?
Yes, Shelley was a great passion of his early in life. Shelley had said that poets were the unacknowledged legislators of the world, and Browning agreed. I think that's why he became disillusioned with Wordsworth after he became the poet laureate. Browning thought that Wordsworth had turned his back on the liberal causes he once fought for so valiantly.
Just for a handful of silver, he left us. Just for a riband to stick in his coat. Found the one gift of which fortune bereft us. Lost all the others she lets us devote. They, with the gold to give, doled him out silver. So much was theirs who so little allowed. How all our copper had gone for his service. Rags, were they purple, his heart had been proud. We that had loved him so, followed him, honored him, lived in his mild and magnificent eye, learned his great language, caught his clear accents, made him our pattern to live and to die. Shakespeare was of us. Milton was for us. Burns, Shelley were with us. They watch from their graves. He alone breaks from the van and the freemen. He alone sinks to the rear and the slaves.
Well done. I always thought that poem rather unfair, but it does have youthful vigor. Ah, that must be Nick. Excuse me. Hello, Nick.
Nick? Who is Nick? I am poor brother Lippo, by your leave. You need not clap your torches to my face. Zooks, what's to blame? You think you see a monk? What? 'Tis past midnight, and you go the rounds, and here you catch me at an alley's end where sportive ladies leave their doors ajar? But the carmine's my cloister. Hunt it up, do. Harry out, if you must show your zeal, whatever rat there haps on his wrong hole. And nip each softling of a wee white mouse, weak, weak, that's crept to keep him company. Aha, you know your betters. Then you'll take your hand away that's fiddling on my throat, and please to know me likewise. Who am I? Why, one, sir, who is lodging with a friend 3 streets off. He's a certain, how do you call, Master, Cosimo of the Medici in the house that caps the corner. Oh, you were best. Remember, and tell me the day you're hanged, how you affected such a gullet's gripe.
Fra Lippo Lippi, this is Jill Tanner.
Not a bad entrance.
Well, hello. I'm terribly sorry. I didn't expect anyone else to be here.
Oh, it's quite all right. Jill's a Browning buff. Worked with me once on Elizabeth Barrett Browning.
Oh, well then. You should feel quite at home here on Wimpole Street. Although, I expect her house, at number 50, has been altered quite a bit since her day.
Even so, I'm sure the spirit of her father still roams the house. Edward Barrett Moulton Barrett. What a tyrant.
Actually, she was highly devoted to him. And he was very supportive of her as she developed her skills as a poet. No, he just didn't want any of his children to marry and leave the household. So when Robert came into her life and they eloped to Italy, her father never spoke to her again. Wouldn't even open her letters.
It's still one of the great love stories. An invalided woman of almost 40, suddenly receiving a letter from someone she'd never met saying, "I love your verses with all my heart, dear Miss Barrett, and I love you too."
And it was during their courtship that Elizabeth was secretly recording her emotions in what came to be called sonnets from the Portuguese.
As Robert called her, my little Portuguese, because of her dark complexion.
I like number 22 the best, the one that begins, "When our two souls stand up erect and strong, face to face, silent, drawing nigh and nigher, until the lengthening wings break into fire at either curved point. What bitter wrong can the earth do to us, that we should not long be here contented? Think, in mounting higher, the angels would press on us, and aspire to drop some golden orb of perfect song into our deep, dear silence. Let us stay rather on earth, beloved, where the unfit contrarious moods of men recoil away and isolate pure spirits, and permit a place to stand and love in for a day, with darkness and the death hour rounding it."
I'm rather old-fashioned, but I still like, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach, when feeling out of sight for the ends of being and ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need, by sun and candlelight. I love thee freely, as men strive for right. I love thee purely as they turn from praise. I love thee with the passion put to use in my old griefs, and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with a love I seem to lose with my lost saints. I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life. And if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death."
That deserves to be famous. But you know, it's interesting that while Elizabeth was drafting out these sonnets, Robert was writing 2 of his best-known short lyrics, Meeting at Night and Parting at Morning, which he didn't send to her to read, as he did most of his poems, probably because they describe what we might call a one-night affair rather than a long-term love.
The grey sea and the long black land, and the yellow half-moon large and low, and the startled little waves that leap in fiery ringlets from their sleep as I gain the cove with pushing prow and quench its speed in the slushy sand. Then a mile of warm, sea-scented beach, 3 fields to cross till a farm appears. A tap at the pane, the quick, sharp scratch and blue spurt of a lighted match, and a voice, less loud through its joys and fears than the 2 hearts beating each to each.
Round the cape of a sudden came the sea, and the sun looked over the mountain's rim, and straight was a path of gold for him, and the need of a world of men for me.
It's hard to believe that Browning's poems were thought to be obscure or difficult.
Well, some of them are.
Remember the story about his poem Sordello? Douglas Jerrold, the playwright, was recuperating after a long illness when someone sent him a copy of Sordello. And he started to read it, but he couldn't make any sense of it at all. He began to imagine that his illness had damaged his brain, that he'd become an idiot. So when his wife and her sister came to visit him, he quickly asked them to read the poem. And after a few minutes, his wife said, "I don't understand what this man means. It's gibberish." At which point, a greatly relieved Mr. Jerrold exclaimed, "Thank God, I'm not an idiot."
But that was before Robert met Elizabeth.
Yes. Yes, she was to be a great influence on his poetic style, and he on hers, of course. Oh, it was quite a collaboration.
It's strange that today, when Robert Browning is still not as widely read as he should be, yet he remains one of the most frequently quoted of poets.
Except that most people don't know that they're quoting Browning. For example, "God's in his heaven, all's right with the world," or "Oh, to be in England now that April's there."
How about, "Grow old along with me, the best is yet to be."
"Boot, saddle, to horse and away."
And "A secret safe twixt you, me, and the gatepost."
And one you always hear. "Never the time and the place and the loved one all together. This path, how soft to pace. This May, what magic weather. Where is the loved one's face? In a dream, that loved one's face meets mine. But the house is narrow. The place is bleak, where outside rain and wind combine with a furtive ear, if I strive to speak. With a hostile eye at my flushing cheek. With a malice that marks each word, each sign. O enemy, sly and serpentine, uncoil thee from the waking man. Do I hold the past thus firm and fast, yet doubt if the future hold I can? This path so soft to pace shall lead through the magic of May to herself indeed. Or narrow if needs the house must be, outside of the storms and strangers, we, oh, close, safe, warm sleep I and she. I and she.
That's lovely, Nick. You're doing your thesis on Browning as a dramatist?
Yes. He spent the better part of 10 years trying to make a career of it, but without success. But the technique of the dramatist influenced the poet and produced those marvelous dramatic monologues like Fra Lippo Lippi and Andrea del Sarto.
And the one I love, My Last Duchess, the Renaissance nobleman discussing his late wife.
Ah, yes. While he negotiates for a new wife with the envoy from the Count. As if this were a palace, you could imagine them touring it together. That's My Last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder now. Frau Pandolf's hands work busily a day, and there she stands. Will it please you sit and look at her? I said Frau Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, the depth and passion of its earnest glance, but to myself they turned, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I, and seemed as they would ask me if they durst how such a glance came there. So, not the first are you to turn and ask thus. Sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess' cheek. Perhaps Frau Pandolf chanced to say, "Her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much," or "Paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half-flush that dies along her throat." Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked whate'er she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Sir, 'twas all one. My favour at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bough of cherry some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, All and each would draw from her alike the approving speech, or blush at least. She thanked men good, but thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900-years-old name with anybody's gift. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling? Even had you skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such an one, and say, just this or that in you disgusts me. Here you miss, or there exceed the mark. And if she let herself be lessoned so, nor plainly set her wits to yours forsooth, and made excuse, e'en then would be some stooping. And I choose never to stoop. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whene'er I passed her. But who passed without much the same smile? This grew, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. There she stands as if alive. Will it please you rise? We'll meet the company below then. I repeat, the Count your master's known munificence is ample warrant that no just pretence of mine for dowry will be disallowed, though his fair daughter's self, as I avowed at starting, is my object. Nay, we'll go together down, sir. Notice Neptune, though, taming a seahorse, thought a rarity, which clouds of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me.
Arci bravo.
Thank you.
Do you think he really did have his wife murdered?
Oh, yes. All smiles stopped together. Although in his old age, Browning agreed with some of his readers who hoped that maybe she'd just been sent to a nunnery, but don't you believe it. Let me put the kettle on. I expect we could all go a cup of tea.
You know, I could live in this neighborhood and in this flat very happily.
Ah, you're like Browning. You like to be right in the heart of things.
Had I but plenty of money, money enough and to spare, the house for me, no doubt, were a house in the city square. Ah, such a life as one leads at the window there. Something to see, by backers, something to hear at least. There the whole day long one's life is a perfect feast, while up at a villa one lives, I maintain it, no more than a beast. Ere you open your eyes in the city, the blessed church bells begin. No sooner the bells leave off than the diligence rattles in. You get the pick of the news, and it costs you never a pin.
I'm sure Robert loved this part of London.
Probably, although in the 1830s and 40s, when Elizabeth was living here on Wimpole Street, there were the most dreadful slums just a stone's throw away. Well, she couldn't see them from her house, but she could in her imagination. And she knew, of course, that 5- and 6-year-old children were being forced to work in factories.
Do ye hear the children weeping, O my brothers, ere the sorrow comes with years? They are leaning their young heads against their mothers, and that cannot stop their tears. The young lambs are bleating in the meadows. The young birds are chirping in the nest. The young fawns are playing with the shadows. The young flowers are blowing toward the west. But the young children, O my brothers, they are weeping bitterly. They are weeping in the playtime of the others, in the country of the free. For oh, say the children, we are weary, and we cannot run or leap. If we cared for any meadows, it were merely to drop down in them and sleep. Our knees tremble sorely in the stooping. We fall upon our faces trying to go, and underneath our heavy eyelids drooping, the reddest flower would look as pale as snow. For all day we drag our burden tiring through the cold dark underground, or all day we drive the wheels of iron in the factories round and round. For all day the wheels are droning, turning. Their wind comes in our faces, till our hearts turn, our heads with pulses burning, and the walls turn in their places. Turns the sky in the high window, blank and reeling. Turns the long light that drops adown the wall. Turn the black flies that crawl along the ceiling. All are turning all the day, and we with all. And all day the iron wheels are droning, and sometimes we could pray, "O ye wheels," breaking out in a mad moaning, "Stop! Be silent! for today. They look up with their pale and sunken faces, and their look is dread to see, for they mind you of their angels in high places, with their eyes turned on deity. How long, they say, how long, O cruel nation, will you stand to move the world on a child's heart? Stifle down with a mailed heel its palpitation, and tread onward to your throne amid the mart. Our blood splashes upward, O gold heaper, and your purple shows your path. But the child's sob and the silence curses deeper than the strong man in his wrath.
Here we are. Yes, people forget sometimes that Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who was a much better known poet than her husband during their lifetimes, wrote poems of many kinds, not just love sonnets. She was a feminist and very interested in political causes.
I gather that Elizabeth is not too frequently read in America these days.
Not as much as Robert. His work's very popular, particularly in the universities.
Oh, just this week I've become acquainted with a wonderful piece of music by an American composer, Charles Ives. It's called the Robert Browning Overture. And if you ask me to play some of it, you're too late, because I've already decided to. Oh, incidentally, Jill, one day you must make a point of visiting the Armstrong Browning Library at Baylor University in Texas. It's named for Professor Armstrong, who taught Browning there for many years. One of the features of the library is a magnificent set of stained glass windows depicting scenes from the poems. I've got some of the slides of them here. Now, here's one from the poem about Abt Vogler, the organist.
All we have willed or hoped or dreamed of good shall exist. Not its semblance, but itself. No beauty, nor good, nor power whose voice has gone forth, but each survives for the melodist when eternity affirms the conception of an hour.
Ah, yes. This is a scene from Paracelsus.
Truth is within ourselves, and to know consists in opening out a way whence the imprisoned splendor may escape.
Here's one of Elizabeth's sonnets from the Portuguese, number 14.
But love me for love's sake, that evermore thou mayst love on through love's eternity.
Isn't that splendid? And this is from Robert's epilogue to Asolando, which was published on the day of his death.
One who never turned his back but marched breast forward, never doubted clouds would break. Greet the unseen with a cheer.
This window is a representation of a poem called The Guardian Angel.
Oh, the colors are beautiful.
Yes, and they each have a definite meaning. Red for love, blue for constancy and goodness, gold for the treasure of heaven. Ah, here's a lovely one. Pippa passes. The years at the spring and days at the morn, mornings at 7, the hillsides dew pearled.
The lark's on the wing, the snail's on the thorn. God's in his heaven, all's right with the world.
Ah, and another popular one, How They Brought the Good News from Ghent to A. The one that starts, I sprang to the stirrup and Joris and he, I galloped, Dirk galloped, we galloped all three.
I see only 2 riders. I presume Dirk has already fallen by the wayside.
Probably.
Oh, I was hoping there'd be a scene from this.
Of course, the Pied Piper of Hamelin.
Out came the children running, all the little boys and girls, with rosy cheeks and flaxen curls and sparkling eyes and teeth like pearls. Lo, as they reached the mountainside, a wondrous portal opened wide.
Ah, and here are my 2 favorite paintings of the Brownings, both of which hang at the library. This one of Elizabeth.
Nathaniel Hawthorne described her as a pale, small person, scarcely embodied at all.
She died in 1861, after just 15 years of marriage. And this one of Robert was painted in 1879, when he was 67. He died 10 years later and was buried in the Poets' Corner of Westminster Abbey.
Those are magnificent.
Baylor University. Well worth a special trip.
May I ask you something I've never quite got round to?
Well, I don't know. Perhaps if you agree to take charge of the tea.
Fair enough. After 30 years of teaching, which is your favorite of all the Browning poems?
Well, by Robert or Elizabeth?
Either one.
Well, it varies from year to year. But at the moment, for reasons as much spiritual as literary, I would probably choose one of Robert's called Prospice. He wrote it in the autumn following Elizabeth's death, so, in a sense, it represents both of them. fear death, to feel the fog in my throat, the mist in my face, when the snows begin and the blasts denote I am nearing the place. The power of the night, the press of the storm, the post of the foe, where he stands, the arch fear in a visible form, yet the strong man must go. For the journey is done, and the summit attained, and the barriers fall. There were battles to fight, ere the guerdon be gained, the reward of it all. I was ever a fighter, so one fight more, the best and the last. I would hate that death bandaged my eyes and forbore and bade me creep past. No, let me taste the whole of it, fare like my peers, the heroes of old. Bear the brunt, in a minute pay glad life's arrears of pain, darkness, and cold. For sudden the worst turns the best to the brave, the black minutes at end, and the elements rage, the fiend voices that rave shall dwindle, shall blend, shall change, shall become first a peace out of pain, then a light, then thy breast. O thou soul of my soul, I shall clasp thee again, and with God be the rest.